from a business standpoint, I have my coaching program, the podcast itself, which they're kind of connected because all the things that I talk on the podcast, it's a very simple thing. People can just apply to get coached by me on the things that I talk about the podcast. Fair and simple, nothing complicated, nothing crazy. It mainly has to do with getting more customers, getting more exposure, brand awareness, and structuring your brand in a way that actually is bringing you more sales.
The Move Entrepreneur Evolved Podcast. Get on it. And we're back with another episode of the Moved Entrepreneur Evolved Podcast. I got my friend here. I'm excited to bring him on. But before that, I just want to let you guys know that you should like and subscribe. And also, the person I'm bringing on is so pristine. She's also an incredible person. But also remember, there's really cool people that are on the podcast to go back, listen to their episodes, and let's get this thing started. Marian Asanu, my man. We finally got connected again. Pumped to have you, man.
100%, man. And thank you for having me on the show. And we tried to kind of do this. It was a little bit on my end with rescheduling, but I appreciate you so much for having me on the show, man.
Man, this is really cool. You inspire a lot of people. I kind of, when I see people that carry themselves well, I try not to kiss anybody's ass on it, but I want to say that you've done a good job. I'm going to take you back a little bit, if that's okay. One of the things in the patterns that I see with you in business is that you kind of started that, hey, start your business from scratch, or, start your own, go into the real estate business from scratch. I think you did an SMAA, or how that is, from scratch. What is it about you that likes to start things from the bottom and then show people that core foundation from the beginning?
So that's a insanely cool question, and I'm glad you actually asked me that now, because that was the only thing that I knew. So I'm an immigrant in the US. I immigrated 12 years, anywhere between 11 and 12 years ago, right? So the first year and a half, first 2 years, I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship, starting business, any of that stuff. So I just worked my ass off, because that's what you do when you immigrate to a brand new country and you barely speak the language. So I worked. I just had 2-3 jobs at times, 7 days a week, things like that, and just saved up some cash. And so the first thing that kind of came naturally in a way was I was looking left and right and see other people. Well, actually, the trigger was so we got married, me and my wife, we got married right before we immigrated. I immigrated with my wife in 2012. And then we took I'm trying to remember exactly the timeline of this, but we took at some point a 5-day vacation to DR, and that was considered our honeymoon, even though it was a long time after the wedding. But what happened was I did not enjoy the vacation as much, because my mind was back at work, thinking that, I'm taking time off, I'm not making money, I'm losing money in a way, right? Because as an employee in the company that I was working at the time, there was no benefits and any of that stuff involved, right? It was just pure. So anyway, the bottom line is that was the trigger for me to start my own business. So the reason that you heard me talk a lot of times about start this, do this from scratch, things like that, because that was the only thing that I knew. Now, a couple years later, what I've learned, actually, this is one of my most successful, I call it campaigns, because a lot of more people kind of relate to this, especially in the online game, was actually acquiring another business. So if you would ask me today, what would I do different? I would look for other businesses, especially distressed ones, with people that have been doing the same thing for a long time. Maybe they're good operators, but they're not business owners. Maybe they're not good managers. They're not good at managing people. Maybe they're not good marketers. They don't know how to market their business. So the only reason that you heard me talk so many times about start this from scratch, do this from scratch, get this going from the ground up and things like that was the only thing that I knew at the time. But a few years ago, so my first business was a moving and storage company. It turned into a little bit of a concierge type of thing. But anyway, bottom line is at some point in time, I had an offer to purchase somebody's business, another moving and storage company, right? So I ended up paying $2,000 for a website, phone number, and email list of buyers. And that $2,000 investment got back a little bit over 300,000 with no additional effort other than the fact that, you know, the website was already there, the phone number was already connected to a really loyal audience of people that have purchased services from these guys. And then from that point on, I just did my magic, installed a pixel on the website and kind of did some retargeting and all that. So the reason that I was only talking about that, and you'll see more content from me about this, actually, even recently, probably maybe a month ago, I posted some reels and also a full podcast episode. Shameless plug, my podcast is the Brand Up show.
Yeah.
So one episode, I actually talk about this, the best thing that you can do and the best marketing campaign, quote unquote, because it's not a marketing campaign, you acquire another business. But again, there's no platform on earth that would have allowed me to pay $2,000 and get a $300,000 return. And that's actually just in a few years. It's like 2 years, because moving forward, a lot of those customers are not even being tracked back to that investment is being tracked as returner customers and things like that. I don't want to get too geeky into the
No, I think
but,
it's I think what you're saying is really good. We've had some really good guests. One of them, Michael Byers, he's a guest that's been on here. And, you know, he's on another level. I mean, he's like 17 acquired and, you know, gone through 40 transactions, things like that. But what I kind of will share in my example of what you just said is that when you're building something from scratch, you have to build the brand. And I don't know if many people know this, but it is actually documented. It's about 6 to 7 years to actually build a brand, to get it to the next true level where people are accepting it. It's now moving through. You can inject people and get it, but it's about 7 to 8 years to get a brand to lock in. Well, kind of a quick story. I had my e-commerce businesses and I started it in my garage. And the first one I started, I don't even know why, it was my twin. It's called Toxic Lounge. To this day, I still don't know how I got with the name, but hey, what the heck. But I did all these core clothing and everything like that. And I did it in my garage. And I'd gotten to like 10 grand a month. We were talking about Fighting Other. Do you remember that brand Affliction?
I do not actually.
Remember the like skulls with like the...
Oh, yeah. Now that you said, yeah.
So I was one of the first online dealers for Affliction back in the day. And so as I'd gotten that, you still don't have all the traction. And one of the things that became very valuable is I bought another business that had the infrastructure.
There you go.
And then I was able to take that. So I'm parlaying on what you're saying. I made my biggest strides, and this is how it goes, when somebody else put all the energy to get it to a certain level, and then I can take that energy and go to the next level. And so I think what you're saying is true. It takes a lot to start something. But if the ship's moving, it's a lot easier to kind of just nudge it a little, and it can kind of, you know, you have to know where to hit the damn tree, but that's the point.
Yeah, and of course there are different stages in somebody's life and journey, especially because we talk about entrepreneurship and starting businesses and growing and building and now even acquiring. Of course, if somebody would have told me this when I got started, I would have said, like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know, like, it doesn't make sense to pay. Now, if you would have said, you can pay 2K and, you know, immediately accelerate your, I would have definitely understood that. But it also depends what's the, you know, the 1 year, the 2 years, the 5-year goal for the person that's doing it. Because there are some people that just like to get brands off the ground, get them a little bit like, you know, these niche sites, like, you know, you just get them, you get them started, especially now with ChatGPT, like you pump 100 different articles in one day, or maybe 200, whatever, as many as you want. So of course there are industries and niches and things like that that make a lot of sense. But in my opinion, you don't even have to buy necessarily the same type of business that you're in. You can just buy somebody that has your audience. So for example, Me and my brother
Groups,
purchased at some point.
groups. You can purchase groups.
Yeah, Facebook groups, YouTube channels, podcasts, right? Like if it's not a personal brand podcast, if it doesn't have your face attached to it and the name, it's really related to that niche. That can easily be something to acquire. And like you said, you buy one that already has the infrastructure, or you buy the customer email list, and then you attach your infrastructure to it. It all depends, what do you have and what are you looking for. But from a customer acquisition standpoint, because that's my bread and butter, I haven't seen any kind of platform, especially from a marketing standpoint, that can have this kind of impact. And on top of that, you have the brand built in people's minds that they purchased already. So it's, in my opinion, and not just in my opinion, you're actually going to see and hear me talk about this topic more on my podcast and on my short form content.
I'm going to kind of pull this through. And I think that most entrepreneurs sometime in their life, when they were younger, they bought some candy, they put it in a plastic bag and they said, how can I make 50 cents off this half of a candy that I bought? Right. Everybody's kind of got that story, or they sold like a bracelet or something. Over and over again, you meet people that are in our situation that they've always tried to sell something when they're a kid. I'm going to kind of tap into something else here, because I think it's what brings out people in life. And I think it's doing things that are activities. And you've always been somebody that lifted. You always were somebody that worked out. And so you get to a point where you kind of get the strength. But I think guys that get to that point, they kind of want to see what they can do about it. And as we were talking earlier, you got into jiu-jitsu. Anyway, it talks about fighting. I lose my mind anyways. But what I want to do is I want to see if we could take something for a second, because you were starting things up. And the process of that was being able to put pieces together from scratch. A lot of times you used keywords like that in your videos and things like that. You've started BJJ from scratch. How do you see the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey that you've gone on to now being a blue belt? And for any of you guys that know this, number one, I'm going to encourage you right now. I'm a dirty white belt, but most people, Jiu-Jitsu dies at blue belt. So I'm really going to encourage you to get that purple. But at the end of the day, my question that you would bring up was just be like, what is it that, because I know how powerful Jiu-Jitsu is, what is it that you're learning about yourself through Jiu-Jitsu that you're applying through business life?
Man, I love this question so much. Actually, not too long ago, I posted this favorite thing that I learned from my instructor. I'm actually turning it into a podcast. So depending at what point in time you're going to launch this, this is going to be my second podcast that has nothing to do necessarily with business. But his quote is this: get comfortable being uncomfortable. So when I heard that for the first time, because I went to him, I think, so I got started doing jiu-jitsu just, I was training boxing and kickboxing. And then on the gym that I was training had two separate rooms. One was jiu-jitsu, the other one was striking. So I was training all the time striking. And for some reason, I was never kind of attached or attracted to grappling. So it was just that. I don't know why, but whatever. So
grabbing sweating men usually isn't the thing we want to do as we get older. That's why. Let's just be real.
Yeah, I mean, if we put it that way, 100%, especially no gi, right? But anyway, bottom line, I got started and I realized, I think the first person that I rolled with was a 16, 17-year-old guy, 70 pounds lighter than me, and the guy just completely destroyed. Like, he played with me the entire 5 minutes and I was just gassing out because I was just using strength. That's the only thing that I had. So, and then the only class that I could do at the time was 5:30 to 6:30 a.m. 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I was the only white belt. This was about a year and 3 months ago, something like that. I've been training a year and 4 months now. So I was training Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I was the only white belt. And you can imagine people were just crushing me because I didn't have and I was tend to use strength. So then when people feel, oh, you want to use strength, now we're gonna, right? So,
Leverage.
but he was always, respectful and
Yeah. I mean, I think that people that have ever been afraid of, I assume everybody's in the martial arts world because I just around it so much. But for anybody, what you're expressing is the idea of incapability of getting out of something. And no men don't understand that. It's like a weird, when you're pinned on with somebody else's chest on you and they got side control, you're not moving, bro.
and you don't want to believe, like, I remember even now, I was looking from the kickboxing part of the gym into the jiu-jitsu mats, and I was seeing, a bunch of people just, and the windows were just all like sweaty and humid and all that. And I'm like, why are they even sweating like this? I was there, striking, hitting the bag and all that. And I was looking on the other side and I'm like, why are they even sweating? They're only on the ground, right? In my head, like that, my nonsense mindset at the time about jiu-jitsu. And then as time went on, I realized, I think it was a month, I was a month in, and I don't know if I was ever able to land a sub on my own on somebody else. And then I went to the instructor and I asked, all right, I have some questions for you. Let's book a private. I book a private with him. And I said, look, so these are my questions. I'm struggling a lot with, first, not being able to escape, from, I think it was at the time, mount, side control, and, my back being taken all the time. And I'm like, how do I even escape from these? And then how do I not put myself into even these positions to be able to not have to defend? So then that was the first time he said, all right, so of course, you doing boxing and kickboxing, striking is so much easier because they're not so many, and not, I don't know, so many. I think there are endless combinations in jiu-jitsu when it comes to like combinations of and sequences of movements. In striking is not as complicated as that. I mean, there are not that many. Of course, when you add, especially in boxing, but when you add Muay Thai into the mix, there are a little more, but still not even close to what jiu-jitsu has. And he said, and you have to be okay being uncomfortable. And then as the moment you agree and the moment you understand that, okay, I'm uncomfortable now, instead of me trying to use all my strength and gas out in 2 minutes, you can try to think a little bit and understand, okay, you're uncomfortable now. Of course, this is just a role. You're not in a competition yet. I think it was like 6 months until I went into one. But I learned to live being uncomfortable, talking now in jiu-jitsu terms, on the mats, and I was not panicking when I was being put in these positions. And I learned, and I had to learn to learn. So that was another thing for me that I realized, all right, this is a sport that I'm going to get humbled every day. Like, I don't care what everybody says, they can probably be 20 years, 30 years in. And it's at some point in time, somewhere on this globe, it's another person that's better than you, or at least they can have a better day or whatever. So the reason that I love the sport a lot and I learn every day from this is, one, you live to understand how to survive when you're uncomfortable. And also, when time comes, of course, if you put enough time into it, another person will be in your spot, and then you'll be the person that, right? So all of these can be applied to business as well. Like all of these concepts, like especially the first quote that I mentioned, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like when you start a business, you are uncomfortable because you have to wear all these hats. Like maybe you start a business to have more time, more money, and spend more time maybe with family. You're going to have none of that for the first 6 months to a year, like maybe even more in some cases. And that's being uncomfortable. Do you learn how to be uncomfortable, or you give up, right? So this was the first thing that I learned. And then the second thing that I feel like it's not being talked about enough is the mental health. Like now I train every day, Monday to Friday. Sometimes I try to hit a Sunday class too.
Dude, you're hooked.
6 and 7:30. Yeah, between 6 and 7:30. But I go in there, like my wife knows, if I don't go, I come at home with all my luggage from the whole day with like stress and crazy stuff going on. The moment I go into the mat is the first thing that I can put the phone down, not touching it. I can train and I live everything at the entrance. But then when I leave literally a new person. Like it's just for me.
Something I
now
think
it's
that,
a lifestyle.
If you're watching this podcast, I'm a dirty white belt. I think if I went like 3 weeks in a row, they'd probably give me a blue belt. But at the end of the day, I think that jiu-jitsu has a few different things. I'll kind of put that in with business as well. One, positioning. We just talked about what you just said, right? Yep. It's like, hey, when you start something from scratch, which is fine. We all do it. You learn a lot, but then you realize positioning is super powerful. And then the other one is that the pressure that you have to learn to manage and breathe through. Yeah, you end up rolling with somebody and they're like 50 pounds heavier than you, and they've got side control and they're using pressure. And until you understand that pressure, it's extremely hard. And when you're in that position, you realize that the pressure is okay. I can just relax. The pressure is okay. Now I position. And myself being a martial artist since I was a kid, this goes through, but it didn't really solidify. I have a good friend, does Sansu, Dave Hopkins. And he taught me one thing, and I didn't learn this until I was doing some of that different art. And he always said, fast is slow, slow is fast.
It's fast, yeah.
And I think that being on a martial arts conversation, there are so many analogies that a martial artist can give in business. The ability to be calm in freak out situations, the ability to be like water, So I think that when we put ourselves into a martial arts situation, you really do learn that you can't get to brown belt without going through purple and blue and what you cannot get there. And I think that's.
Let me stop you for 1 second. I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I just.
Dude, I hope you cut me off. Let's do this.
You said this, and this. I meant to actually bring it up, but I totally forgot when we started talking about it. You said you cannot be a brown belt without actually putting in the work, and that's why I love martial arts so much, because you cannot fake it. Like you can fake all the PR and you can fake the followers and the butts and all that. But you're not able to fake any. The moment you can fake it if you want, but then the moment you start rolling or sparring with someone, you'll see, people will see, and yourself you'll realize, oh shit, actually I'm not as good as I thought.
I was in Thailand, and there was a guy. He was England, I think, stocky black kid. So every definition in his arms, he literally had tattoos all the way down. And I remember we were training and I'm in Thailand and I touch gloves. I'm like, well, here we go. This is going to happen, I guess. And you never know, right? Everybody says start slow. That never works. So then you basically, I remember touching gloves going, all right, here we go. Now I'd been banging for a while, so I've been okay. And he came in and I slipped. Marion, I stuck him in his, boom, right in his face. He steps back and I hit him a little harder than I wanted to. We were kind of training. I remember that because no, I didn't put him out. But what happened is his head went back and I immediately was like, here we go. Now we're fighting, right? And here's the thing I kind of want to express about people, even in business. And that is his head came back and he looked at me and I went, it's on now. And he just looked at me and he goes, hold on. I was like, okay. He goes, I've never been hit like that before. And I stopped for a second and I said, I've never had anybody look like you not come after you after hitting somebody like that. So kind of the moral of the story is like, not everybody perceives who they are. And we're actually very naked. And not everybody's a black belt in business. People are blue belts, but you assume they know much more. But you know how much further a blue belt is than a white belt. It's calmness. That's what happens.
Yeah, and it's maybe it's a lot more, especially in the defense part, because I remember the only thing that I was focusing the first it was the first month and a half until I started booking a couple of privates with the instructor, and he actually told me like, look, white belt to blue belt is really focusing on learning how to defend and learning how to not be put in those positions. So then I rewire myself instead of just trying to go after someone, by trying to even, kind of observe and look and understand what their game is. Sometimes people look a certain way, but then you realize, they're much stronger than they look, or because of the way that they use the timing of using strength, maybe they only use strength when they mount you, and then that's also another thing that you learn either by trial and error, or if you book some privates with somebody more experienced. But yeah, 100%, man. I love the sport for those main reasons, and a lot more that I could probably talk hours about this.
I whenever I get with people, we start talking about fighting, I literally have to try to find another topic, because I'll do this for hours. There's a list of people that contact me, and I'm kind of I'd say that I influence somebody. If you're around me enough, you're going to end up in a jiu-jitsu school, a boxing school. You're going to end up in something, because I always say this, and this is the statement I tell people, especially men, make it very clear. Whatever age you're at right now is the best body you got. Go fucking use it, because you're not going to be able to do this right now. Use it, please. And I think that a lot of business owners, I don't know if you know this, but the profession of an engineer is a lot of jiu-jitsu guys. A lot of engineers go into jiu-jitsu, and it's because their minds work the same way, like a chess player.
Yeah, but I think a couple shots ahead, couple moves ahead. It makes a lot of sense, actually, now that you think. Yeah,
I know that you're doing big stuff.
Got a couple software engineers. Got a couple of software engineers now that I'm thinking.
Now you're going to think about it, right? And the reason why is because their brains, once they get past the cardio, once they get past the strength, their brains are reverse engineered. And so immediately you get engineers going, okay, now I'm strong enough. I have enough stamina. Now, how do I reverse engineer that move?
What's next?
Because that's it. And now you're like, shit, now I'm dealing with a good brain. I used to be more athletic, right? I think, and I'm going to kind of get us to kind of get here, and we'll close this out, because I think if I make this one a little bit shorter, I think that I have some reasons to come back again and we do a longer episode. Does that sound good?
We need to do a part 2 on this, 100%.
So my thing is, what is it you're doing now? You got a podcast going. I do have, other things that we can talk about. Your story is someone that I think many people can look up to. You're an immigrant that came to the US, started from scratch. You went into real estate, started from scratch, started from these things. I think you're what entrepreneurism is, if that's a word. I don't know if it's an ism, but what is it you're working on now? And how do people get a hold of you?
100%. So the easiest way to kind of get up to date to all my kind of new projects going on is my podcast. So whatever you're consuming this episode, regardless if it's audio or video, my podcast is called The Brand Up Show, and then it's on all platforms. So that is where I share all the upcoming stuff coming up, all the new stuff coming up. In terms of from a business standpoint, I have my coaching program, the podcast itself, which they're kind of connected, because all the things that I talk on the podcast, it's a very simple thing. People can just apply to get coached by me on the things that I talk about the podcast. Fair and simple, nothing complicated, nothing crazy. It mainly has to do with getting more customers, getting more exposure, brand awareness, and structuring your brand in a way that actually is bringing you more sales. We can talk about this in part 2 in terms of, because for some people, it doesn't really make sense to build a personal brand if you're planning to sell your business in the future, because a personal brand, you cannot exit. Nobody's going to buy your name to put it on their page, because it doesn't work that way, right? And then on the investment side, I do real estate. The way our process is fairly simple from an investment standpoint. We look for houses that need a little cosmetic work, so nothing crazy. I'm not looking to do any work on the structural based or any of that, mainly cosmetic. So, design, exterior, interior. We renovate them, put them on Airbnb, so cash flow right away. And then we typically look for getting a HELOC from the bank and use that money into the next deal and so forth.
Got it.
And then I'm also a partner in a couple other things, meaning I mainly deal with the marketing side of things. So my wife has a salon and an education company, so I handle the marketing side of things. My first business, the moving and storage company, it's still up and running. I have a partner in that. I focus a lot on the marketing side of things and the growth and acquiring other companies to kind of merge them in. So this is what I do currently. But again, I talk about all this stuff on the show.
Podcast.
So people can consume it there and kind of learn from the free episodes, or they can apply to work with me.
Dude, this has been awesome.
I try not to be too complicated on the special. Hopefully, I gave the easy to digest version of it.
And that makes you a brown black belt in the way you do what you're doing in business. But don't underestimate the pain and the stories that you had to get there. So I think that's really cool. All right. Well, this ends this episode, short and sweet, which means we're going to double up on this. And with that, Marian, you're the man. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the show. For everybody, make sure you go back, you like and subscribe. But most of all, go back and think of these other guests as well. You'll be blown away at the stories they have. Thanks a lot, Marian. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
If you like this episode, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just like Nike is to athletes, Moved is to entrepreneurs.